Lent, the great fast of the Church's year, takes us from Jesus driven by the Spirit out into the desert, fasting and praying in the wilderness at the beginning of his ministry. Then fast forward through to the Passion story and the Via Dolorosa, the painful, bleak tale of his betrayal by a friend, his farcical trials, his scourging and crowning with thorns, his stumbling walk through the streets of Jerusalem to Golgotha, and there his crucifixion. Every year of my life since I was a child, with the whole church, I have heard the readings of this agony and sorrow, sat with the horror of his torture, heard his words from the cross, and thought about what it means to be human. Cruel, scheming, ruthless, fearful, trapped by politics and addiction to money, caught up in circumstances beyond our control. But there, in the midst of it, Jesus, also fully human, showing us the possibilities of extreme forgiveness, the outer edge of courage. At the beginning and the end of the Lenten journey are two intensely human moments. Jesus in the desert wilderness, hungry, looking at the stones that resemble bread, and Jesus dying under torture, saying simply, "I'm thirsty." And maybe this is the beginning and the end of the human experience, being hungry and thirsty, being vulnerable and alone and in pain. In the last section of the Lenten journey, we observe a curious and all too familiar phenomenon: the drawing back of his fellow human beings from a person in desperate straits. Judas betrays him. Peter denies him. Pilate washes his hands of him. The soldiers strip him and mock him. The crowds watch as he struggles to carry his cross. The women stand watching, powerless to intervene, at the foot of his cross. This journey is characterized by loneliness and abandonment. Wherever there is cruelty in the wielding of political power, it is always so. Think of Julian Assange, the journalist who exposed the realities of political power, in solitary confinement as the months and the years drag by. The Via Dolorosa is a lonely path. At the beginning of the 1990s, I was given the unexpected privilege of an invitation to be part of a regular Tuesday evening fellowship run by a Bexhill Methodist minister at North High Prison. For some while that was how I spent my Tuesday evenings, and there made many friends and gained many insights. I remember from those days a young man, a burglar who later came to live with us on his release because he had nowhere else to go, saying to me, "There's nothing you can do about the government, Pen. It was the government killed Jesus. There ain't nothing you can do about the government, Pen." At this particular point in my life, his words come back to me with vivid poignancy. I think he was probably right. The thing is, through the centuries, we see the same cast of characters coming round again and again. And here in our day, we not only have them in our midst, but we have the opportunity to see transmitted by cell phones to every corner of the world the impact and effect of their activities. It's unlikely the ordinary people of Hastings ever saw or heard about the Carthusian monks hung, drawn and quartered at Tyburn by Henry VIII because they wouldn't renege on their faith and embrace his Reformation. It's unlikely ordinary people in Hastings would have seen the conditions in the slave ships transporting workers for the sugar plantations. Slavery was abolished in the UK in the 1830s, of course, but as bicycles and cars began to appear, who among the ordinary people would have known about King Leopold, who owned the Congo as a personal enterprise, receiving in basket loads the hands and the feet of those Africans who could not fulfill the rubber quotas fast enough? There's no wonder, though, is there, that the enslaved people of colonial settlement found such comfort and refuge in Jesus, they who knew so well what it is to be broken in body, if not in spirit, or to be obliged to stand at the foot of the cross and watch the cruelties of injustice enacted, the revolting exhibition of dominance and the strutting of power. We knew a little more, perhaps, in the 20th century about the Warsaw Ghetto and later about apartheid South Africa, but there were plenty here in 1930s England who thought well of that effective German Chancellor who built the Autobahn and pledged to restore prosperity and crush the industrial strikes. Likewise, the English newspapers of the 1970s were eager to report the more extreme activities of the African National Congress, identifying the anti-apartheid movement with the political left during those days of the Cold War. We did know of these things, yes, but it was all very far away, and public opinion was steered by what we read in the Times and the Telegraph. This time, it is different. Here they are again, this same cast of characters, but this time recorded for all of us to see. The cruelty of Herod Antipas, son of Herod the Great, who ordered the slaughter of the innocents. The political vacillating of Pontius Pilate, seeking to appease the people, trapped by position, puppet of the empire, abusing power and avoiding responsibility, trying to both deliver a man to death and wash his hands of the whole thing at the same time. The crowd shouting "Crucify" or "Hosanna" as the mood takes them. And even as it all comes round again, here is Simon of Cyrene, the African, who could not change the outcome, but helped a man carry his cross. Here is the same abandonment and loneliness, the same silence, the same clutch of fear as the man who sits in the seat of power and can find nothing wrong in this man, goes on most publicly to wash his hands, to abdicate responsibility, and to throw him to the wolves. Here again, we see what it is to be driven out into the desert wilderness and the desolate wasteland where a man sits and looks at the rubble and only knows he is hungry. Here again, we see the lifting of the cross and the agony, and a man say, I am thirsty. And yes, this time we can see it play out on our cell phones. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? Whatever you did to the least of these, you did it unto me. My God, why have you abandoned me? Our responsibility as Christians is to hold fast to the gospel of hope and redemption. The only germ of hope to be found in the whole obscene parade is there in the words of Jesus, as the soldier, only doing his job, hammers a 6-inch nail through his wrist into the wood of the cross. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. All I know to do in the times we are passing through is to pray, to keep watch, to inform ourselves, to speak up for the vulnerable and the abandoned, and to build the power of redemption and forgiveness into our own personal relationships. We are in this world for the specific purpose of bearing witness to the courage Jesus had, not to fight, but to forgive. To be honest, to be straight with people, but to hold out to one another his redeeming love. To do as he did, make friends with the outcast, bring healing to the suffering, feed the hungry and set the captive free. Walk through this world with the simplicity that brings reconciliation and peace. And then, when on Good Friday we pray through the stations of the cross, let us pause at the figure of Simon of Cyrene coming in from the country, and place our hand upon him in blessing and say, thank you, South Africa. It will pass, as all things do. Those days when Jesus set his face like flint to go up to Jerusalem and his passion and death unfolded, they passed. Of course they did. But even when a thing passes, it is not over. It was not over when night fell on Good Friday. And in our day too, when Rafah is nothing more than a blood-stained rubble heap, it will not be over. It is exactly as Jesus said. The seed that falls into the ground and dies will bring forth a harvest in due course. By God's mercy, may it be the seed of change, not of vengeance. As we watch with horror these atrocities unfold, please can I urge you to hang on to one thing. The only path to lasting peace passes through forgiveness. There is no other way to peace. At the present time, some peace activists, including ministers of the Church, are so distraught and upset by the horror they are powerless to stop, that they resort to saying, there can be no forgiveness for this. But But that is not only incorrect, it is disastrous. The way to peace leads through forgiveness, always, without exception, every time. Jesus made this clear as he was nailed to the cross. Hold on to this and never let it go, for it is the way of salvation. Don't collude, don't support, don't vote for the violent, but never deny forgiveness. Otherwise, apart from praying every day, all we can do is to ensure that in the world as it will become, there will be kindness, gentleness, and understanding, celebration of difference, thoughtfulness, compassion, and peace. How do we ensure that this will be so? By putting it there ourselves every day, by sowing the seeds of love in the place where we are, by whatever means we have.